Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we've got quite a stack of sources here, all focused on one of the, well, let's just say boldest predictions in crypto history, and
Bold is one word for it. Polarizing, maybe?
definitely polarizing. We're talking about the claim that XRP is, and I quote, destined to hit $10,000 per coin.
Right. $10,000. It's a number that immediately gets attention, doesn't it?
It really does. And we've got the prep notes, analyst takes, the key argument someone would use to build this case in a big discussion.
Yeah, our mission today isn't really to, predict the price ourselves. That's not what we do.
No, definitely not.
We're here to dissect the argument presented in these sources. Like, what's the logic? What utility are they claiming? What are the market cap implications? Basically, run the numbers and see what kind of, financial reality would need to exist for this target to make any sense.
Exactly. And before we really dive into the multi-trillion-dollar question that this price raises,
Which is a huge question.
huge, but there was something really interesting tucked away in these prep notes we found. It's sort of meta about how this kind of content even gets seen.
Oh, yeah, the call to action bit. That was fascinating.
Right. The notes explicitly say, like step-by-step instructions, before we dive into whether XRP can really hit $10,000, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.
And they explain why. It says it helps the channel grow, and it helps us keep bringing you the most important stories shaping the future of crypto.
It's such a clear window into the mechanics, isn't it? How important that engagement, liking, subscribing, commenting actually is.
Absolutely. It's the algorithm fuel. It's what helps content like this, deeper analysis that takes time actually surface instead of just getting buried under, like, quick takes and hype.
It lets us keep doing these deep dives for you, the listener, who actually wants to get into the weeds. So yeah, a little reminder there. Engagement really does matter if you value this kind of analysis.
Well said. It's just part of the modern media landscape, I suppose.
It is. Okay, so we've covered the mechanics of getting eyeballs on the content. Now, let's get back to the mechanics of a, frankly, staggering financial valuation.
Right. Let's unpack it. The mission. Analyze the core thesis for $10,000 XRP. Pit the utility arguments against, the hard market realities.
So the core claim, stated simply in these notes, XRP is destined for $10K. Why? Long-term adoption and its core utility in global finance, cross-border payments, that kind of thing.
Okay, so the thesis breakdown. The notes detail XRP's proposed role. It's meant to be a bridge asset. Think replacing or at least massively streamlining the old correspondent banking system.
Which is notoriously slow and expensive,
All
right?
So XRP would provide on-demand liquidity, or ODL, for banks. It gets integrated into settlement systems. It becomes the way value moves across borders almost instantly. That's the vision.
And the key assumption driving the price prediction
is that this massive foundational utility, this integration into the plumbing of global finance, creates this huge, almost compulsory demand, not just speculative, but necessity-driven demand. And the sources say this will massively boost demand.
Okay, necessity-driven demand. But here's where my calculator starts smoking. The math.
Okay, let's confront that head on. The sources note the circulating supply is around 55 billion XRP right now, give or take.
55 billion.
So if one XRP is worth $10,000, you multiply those. That's a market capitalization of $550 trillion.
Wow, okay. 550 trillion.
Trillion, with a T.
That number is just, it's hard to even conceptualize in today's terms.
It is, and the notes acknowledge this. There's a whole section titled Why It Matters, the Market Cap Implication, to put it in context.
Like comparing it to other markets.
Exactly. The entire global stock market, maybe around $100 trillion, give or take market fluctuations.
Yeah.
All the gold ever mined, roughly $15 trillion market cap.
So $550 trillion for XRP alone, it's not just becoming a big player.
No, it's not just disrupting finance at that point. It means XRP would have to essentially absorb or represent the value of, almost everything else combined. It implies a complete redefinition of global asset valuation.
So the prediction isn't just XRP goes up a lot. It requires global finance to fundamentally restructure itself, concentrating an absolutely enormous slice of global wealth into this one digital asset. That's a prerequisite.
Precisely. And that prerequisite explains the huge divide we see. The maximalists, the true believers, they see this future as, almost inevitable. The tech is just that much better, so the value must consolidate there eventually.
And the other side?
The realists, or maybe the skeptics, they look at $550 trillion and just say, nope, mathematically impossible under any economic system we can realistically foresee. It breaks the current models.
But the notes argue these kinds of extreme predictions, even if they sound like pure fantasy, actually play a role. They bring up Bitcoin's history.
Yeah, that's a really important comparison they make, the $1 million Bitcoin predictions.
People laughed at those for years.
And they did, widely ridiculed. But the notes argue these huge, almost mythical targets are powerful narrative anchors. They give long-term holders something to cling to, they fuel community buzz, they keep people engaged through brutal bear markets.
So the number itself, the $10,000, it might be what the notes call hopium.
Right, pure hope. But that hopium keeps XRP relevant, keeps it in the conversation, keeps attracting attention, and, potentially, new users or developers. The prediction itself becomes a market force.
Okay, that makes sense. And that focus on relevance and adoption leads straight into the next big section in these notes, the institutional and utility angle.
Ah, yes. This is where, as you said, it gets really interesting. Because the argument shifts from just broad market sentiment to, like, concrete business use cases.
Less hype, more function.
Exactly.
Ugh.
The core of the bullish argument here is Ripple's work, the partnerships they've built with hundreds of banks, payment providers, even exploring things with central banks. This, the notes argue, gives XRP a unique, real-world utility case.
Something that separates it from, say, a meme coin or even some smart contract platforms that don't have that direct financial institution link.
Precisely. If you're talking about institutions adopting this, the demand profile changes completely. It's not retail FOMO driving it.
Right. It's a bank trying to solve a real expensive problem, moving money across borders efficiently.
Exactly. Let's get into the mechanics they describe. Traditional international payments. They rely on nostro vostro accounts. Basically, banks have to park money, pre-funded liquidity, in accounts at other banks all over the world.
Which ties up huge amounts of capital, right? Just sitting there.
Immense amounts, globally. Capital that's dead, earning nothing. XRP's on-demand liquidity, the ODL system, aims to fix that. XRP acts as a super short-term bridge asset.
So Bank A wants to send dollars to Bank B in euros instead of using pre-funded accounts.
Bank A converts dollars to XRP, zips the XRP across the ledger instantly, and Bank B immediately converts that XRP into euros. The whole process takes seconds.
And the capital isn't tied up for days or weeks.
Right. So the demand for XRP in this model isn't just about holding it, it's driven by the velocity of its use. The more transactions need that bridge, the more demand there is for XRP to be that bridge. It could potentially free up trillions in trapped capital globally.
And that's the necessity-driven demand. A bank needs XRP right now to settle a payment.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
It's potentially more stable, more predictable demand than, say, people speculating on price appreciation. That's the institutional hook. Banks become compelled users because it saves them money and frees up capital, not just optional traders. That's the dream underpinning the $10K thesis.
Okay, strong utility case. But utility doesn't just magically erase the laws of supply and demand, does it?
Not at all. And this is where the notes bring in the major counter-argument, the really big hurdle, the supply constraint.
They both in the room.
Definitely. Bitcoin's designed for scarcity, right?
Yeah.
Max supply of 21 million coins, finite, XRP. Total supply is 100 billion, 100 billion.
That's a lot more zeros.
It's a fundamentally different scale. And that sheer number makes extreme price targets like $10,000 incredibly difficult mathematically, even if demand is high.
Yeah.
There's just so much of it.
And we need to talk about how that supply is managed too. The escrow system Ripple uses. How does that play into this? Because not all 100 billion are circulating right now.
Correct. We have about 55 billion circulating. The remaining amount, roughly 45 billion, is held by Ripple in cryptographically secured escrows.
And they release some periodically.
Yeah, the system is set up to release up to 1 billion XRP per month. Often, Ripple doesn't use all of it for their programs or sales, and the unused portion gets locked back up in a new escrow at the end of the queue.
So it controls the immediate floodgates, prevents a massive dump onto the market.
It does control immediate supply pressure.
Yeah.
But long term, that $10,000 valuation or the $550 trillion market cap eventually has to reckon with the potential for that full 100 billion supply to enter circulation. Or you have to assume a huge chunk stays locked forever or gets burned somehow.
So if the full 100 billion did circulate at $10,
then the market cap jumps to $1,000 trillion, $1 quadrillion, a number that's, well, purely theoretical at this point.
So the conflict is stark. Can this utility, this institutional adoption, grow fast enough and big enough to actually absorb all that potential supply pouring onto the market over time?
That's the absolute core tension.
Yes. And to try and measure if that absorption is even feasible, the analysts in these notes suggest a specific benchmark, comparing XRP's potential market cap to the volume handled by SWIFT.
Right, the SWIFT comparison. SWIFT is, the dominant messaging network for traditional cross-border banking, is the incumbent.
But it's just a messaging system, isn't it? It doesn't actually move the money itself.
That's a critical distinction. SWIFT sends the payment instructions securely. The actual settlement still relies on the correspondent banking network, the Nostro Vostro accounts we talked about. But SWIFT messages facilitate tens of trillions of dollars in transactions annually. That huge volume represents the total addressable market, the TAM, that XRP aims to disrupt, specifically the settlement layer of that market.
So if XRP is going to be the new global settlement rail,
You needs to capture a significant chunk of the value transfer currently facilitated by SWIFT messages. But replacing or even significantly augmenting SWIFT, which is deeply embedded in basically every major financial institution globally, that's a monumental challenge.
it sounds like David versus Goliath, but Goliath has been the standard for decades.
It really is. So this metric forces a dose of realism. Analysts need to ask, okay, what percentage of that multi-trillion-dollar annual flow does XRP need to handle consistently just to justify, say, a $1 trillion market cap, let alone $550 trillion?
It's not about matching the dollar value directly, but replacing the function of liquidity provision.
Exactly. If XRP genuinely becomes the indispensable way that liquidity moves for trillions of dollars worth of global trade and finance, then the pathway to a massive valuation starts to look mathematically plausible, even if it's still astronomical.
Okay, so beyond that big theoretical SWIFT comparison, the notes say people following this need to track specific real-world utility metrics. What should learners be watching?
Right. You need ground truth, not just theory. First, the notes emphasize tracking on-chain transaction volume for XRP itself. Is the network actually being used for payments and settlement, or is most of the volume just speculative trading between exchanges?
Genuine utility versus exchange churn.
Exactly. Second, closely monitor the utilization of XRP liquidity corridors and remittance use cases. Are banks and payment providers actually using ODL consistently? Is the volume going through those specific corridors growing? And how fast?
So tracking the ODL adoption curve.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And third, related to that, is tracking the velocity of XRP. How often is the average coin changing hands? In a settlement context, high velocity is good. It means the asset is being used efficiently as that short-term bridge, not just being held.
Got it. Usage, corridor growth, velocity.
Boom.
And speaking of things institutions need to trust, we can't ignore the elephant that was in the room, the SEC lawsuit.
Ah, yes, the Ripple versus SEC case. The notes frame this as absolutely pivotal. It wasn't just a legal skirmish. It was an existential test for XRP's viability in the crucial U.S. market.
And the fact that Ripple, well, largely prevailed.
The fact they survived it, got a degree of clarity, is cited in these notes as massively boosting XRP's credibility with institutions. Think about it. If you're a major bank considering using this new tech for billions in payments, you need regulatory certainty. Seeing XRP navigate that SEC challenge provides a significant degree of comfort.
It sort of de-risked it in the eyes of traditional finance.
To a large extent, yes. The notes even suggest specifically looking at the price reaction when the key rulings came down. Why was that so important as a precedent?
Good question. What do the notes say?
Well, the ruling itself was nuanced, right? It distinguished between Ripple's direct institutional sales of XRP, which the judge did deem unregistered securities, and the programmatic sales on exchanges to retail buyers, which were not deemed securities.
Ah, that distinction.
That distinction provided a potential, albeit complex, framework for how other digital assets might be treated under U.S. law. And the price jump that followed wasn't just short-term hype. The market was pricing in that reduced regulatory risk.
So it showed that legal clarity directly translates into capital inflow and positive price movement.
Exactly. It cemented the idea that regulatory milestones are huge potential catalysts for major price bumps. And crucially, that clarity could pave the way for more cautious institutions to finally start integrating XRP, which loops back to fueling that core $10K utility argument.
Okay, this is making more sense. Let's shift gears a bit now to the human element. How does this giant $10,000 number affect the psychology of people actually in the market, the long-term holders versus the short-term traders?
That's a great point. For the long-term holders, the Hocha dealers, this $10K narrative is absolutely fundamental. It's the basis for what the notes call the diamond hands mentality.
Right, hold on, no matter what.
Exactly. This huge future target gives them the conviction to ride out extreme volatility, massive price drops, multi-year bear markets. They see today's price, whatever it is, as just a temporary discount on its inevitable $10,000 destiny. They're bought into the vision of XRP replacing SWIFT, more than the current quarterly metrics.
So they're betting purely on the long-term utility thesis, eventually winning out over the supply issues.
That's the bet, yes. Now, flip that. For short-term traders, the $10K prediction creates fantastic opportunities for volatility trading.
They don't need to believe it'll actually hit $10.
Not necessarily. They just need the narrative to be strong enough to cause big price swings around news events. A major partnership announcement, another positive regulatory development, a general crypto bull run these things, amplified by the $10K hope, can cause sharp temporary spikes of, say, 50%, 100% or more.
So they trade the hype generated by the prediction itself.
Precisely. That massive potential ceiling acts like a magnet, drawing in speculative capital whenever there's positive momentum. It creates tradable chop.
But these notes also include a pretty serious warning about the psychological danger here, don't they?
They do. A very clear risk is highlighted. Over-optimism leading to bag holding.
Meaning people buy the top of a hype cycle?
Exactly. Retail investors might pile in heavily during a major pump, maybe after a big announcement, truly believing the $10K rocket is finally launching now. But if the underlying institutional adoption doesn't scale up fast enough to support that elevated price,
The price corrects, and they're stuck holding XRP at a much higher cost basis.
right, they become bag holders. The notes stress the importance of distinguishing between the long-term narrative potential and the actual measurable progress in utility adoption quarter by quarter. That distinction is key to avoiding the emotional trap.
Okay, so zooming out again, what does this whole XRP saga, especially this $10K prediction, mean for the wider crypto space? It seems to challenge some fundamental ideas about how Web3 assets should be valued.
It absolutely does. This is the Web3 valuation debate the notes touch on. If XRP actually achieves significant sustained growth because of its institutional use case, even if it never hits $10K, maybe it hits $50 or $100 based on real utility.
That would still be huge validation.
Monumental validation. It would strongly support the case for utility-driven cryptocurrencies. Things designed as payment rails, settlement layers, functional platforms potentially being more valuable long-term than assets based purely on speculation, scarcity narratives alone, or, mean value.
So it forces a big question. How should we value these things? Are they like high-growth tech stocks?
That's one model the notes propose, the tech stock model. Value them based on adoption metrics, enterprise partnerships, network effects, maybe even something akin to recurring revenue from transaction fees based on business traction.
Or are they more like currencies?
Or like currencies or commodities, valued based on supply and demand dynamics, liquidity depth, velocity of money, maybe their role as a store of value or medium of exchange. The XRP debate really brings this tension to the forefront. If XRP succeeds via the institutional route, the tech stock model, which emphasizes real-world business integration, gets a massive boost within Web3.
Interesting. And the notes suggest if XRP does succeed improving this institutional market, it won't just be good for XRP.
No, the prediction is it could trigger a kind of sector rotation within crypto. If XRP demonstrates that banks and payment providers will adopt blockchain for settlement, then capital is likely to flow towards other projects trying to do similar things.
Looking for the next XRP.
Sort of. Or just recognizing that the entire category has been de-risked. The notes specifically mention a few potential beneficiaries, comparative networks.
Oh, which ones are highlighted as relevant competitors or comparables?
Well, Stellar XLM comes up frequently. It's often seen as a direct competitor, also focused on cross-border payments and remittances, maybe targeting slightly different niches like retail or developing economies, but definitely in the same ballpark.
Okay, Stellar. Who else?
Hedera, HBAR, is mentioned. Its focus is heavily on enterprise use cases and a governance model run by large corporations, which appeals directly to that institutional angle. And also Quant, QNT.
Quant's focus is interoperability, right? Connecting different systems.
It's exactly. Bridging legacy financial systems and various blockchains. So if the core idea of linking traditional finance to DLT gains traction because of XRP, Quant could benefit significantly too. Their success, in this view, is partly tied to XRP, proving the demand actually exists at scale.
That makes sense. And to give context to this idea of utility driving unexpected value, the notes use a major historical parallel from within crypto itself.
Right, they point to Ethereum. ETH's rise is presented as the prime example of utility creating value far beyond initial expectations.
People were bullish on Ethereum early on, but maybe not this bullish.
Exactly. Early forecasts were significant, but then came DeFi summer, then the NFT explosion, the massive growth of dApps on its network. These new use cases, these new utility verticals, completely transformed Ethereum's value proposition and sent its price soaring far beyond what many early models predicted.
The utility created was broader and deeper than initially conceived.
Precisely. So the lesson the notes draw for XRP is, while the focus now is cross-border payments, the ultimate potential might come from future use cases we haven't even fully grasped yet. Maybe tokenizing real-world assets on the XRP ledger, maybe becoming infrastructure for central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. The current utility might just be chapter 1.
Okay, that's a powerful framing. Let's try and synthesize some of this now, connecting the past context with that future potential. The notes bring in a surprising parallel, the 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah, that socioeconomic context is really interesting. The argument is that the XRP narrative, consciously or not, taps into that deep, lingering distrust of traditional banks that came out of the 2008 meltdown.
The bailouts, the perceived lack of transparency, the slowness of the old systems.
All of that. So XRP gets positioned not just as a cheaper, faster technology, but as part of a fundamentally different kind of financial system, one that's potentially more transparent, more efficient, maybe less prone to centralized failure points.
So it's selling an alternative system, tapping into that emotional desire for something better after 2008.
Exactly. And that emotional, almost philosophical appeal is powerful. It helps fuel the narrative and keeps people invested in the vision, perhaps even separate from the cold, hard $10K math. It's the promise of fixing a broken system.
Got it. And analytically, the note suggests looking back, too, with that comparative growth chart metric. What should learners take away from comparing BTC, ETH, and XRP's historical growth?
It's about understanding their different scaling engines. Bitcoin's growth, largely driven by its hard-coded scarcity and the digital gold narrative. It scales as more people adopt it as a store of value, often reacting to macroeconomic uncertainty.
Slow and steady store of value.
Kind of. Ethereum's growth. That scales via network effects. Every new developer building a dApp, every new user joining DeFi or buying an NFT adds value to the whole ecosystem, creating exponential potential.
More usage equals more value.
Right. Now, XRP, according to this thesis, scales differently again. Its growth should theoretically be tied to transaction velocity and institutional integration. If XRP's growth curve starts to suddenly hockey stick upwards, correlating directly with massive ODL adoption by banks.
Mirroring how Ethereum took off after DeFi and NFTs found product market fit.
Exactly. That would be the strongest quantitative sign that the utility thesis is actually playing out, and that the path towards a much higher valuation, maybe even those astronomical numbers, is becoming reality. You'd see it in the growth curve dynamics.
So ultimately, it all boils down to this. Does the utility actually materialize at the scale required?
That's the final utility check, as the notes put it. The $10,000 prediction lives or dies based on whether XRP truly becomes the mandatory, globally adopted infrastructure for cross-border liquidity and remittances, used by the biggest banks, the biggest payment processors day in, day out.
If it becomes indispensable.
Then the demand could theoretically scale to meet that multi-trillion-dollar market cap requirement. But if adoption is patchy, if banks find workarounds, if modernized legacy systems like Swift GPI prove good enough,
then the demand simply won't be there to absorb 100 billion coins at $10 cage.
And the prediction remains a fascinating but ultimately unfulfilled piece of crypto lore. A beautiful impossibility, as you said earlier.
Wow. Okay, this has been incredibly thorough. We've really dug into the guts of this $10,000 XRP prediction, looking at the analyst arguments, the utility claims, the huge market cap numbers, the supply constraints, the metrics to watch.
It really highlights that core tension, doesn't it? On one hand, you have a compelling utility argument, solving a real problem for institutions, achieving regulatory clarity, the sheer potential of disrupting cross-border payments. It's powerful.
Undeniably powerful, but then you crash into the mathematical wall.
The hard constraints. That massive 100 billion supply, the $550 trillion market cap required for 10K, it just injects this profound dose of skepticism that's impossible to ignore.
So, for you, the listener, getting up to speed quickly in crypto often means holding both these things in your head at once, understanding the powerful narratives and the maximalist hype,
while also keeping a very clear eye on the fundamental constraints, the supply dynamics, the real-world adoption metrics. You need both the dream and the reality check.
Well put. And to wrap up this deep dive, the source material actually provided a final provocative thought, an engagement hook designed to make the audience think beyond just the price tag.
Yeah, it's a good one. It forces you to consider the implications if this seemingly impossible prediction actually came true or even got close.
Okay, let's hear it. What's the question we should leave our listeners mulling over?
The question posed is this. If XRP truly became the backbone of global payments, handling trillions of dollars daily, would you still fully trust that system? Or would the inherent centralization of that utility, knowing that one entity, Ripple, historically created and still influences a large part of the supply and network direction, raise entirely new fundamental questions about who really controls the flow of money in this new financial world?
Yeah, that's a much bigger question than just $10,000, isn't it?
It really is. It's about power, control, and trust in the infrastructure itself. Something to chew on.